So frontline Syndra on 1-4, what's the optimal placement for Syndra? I couldn't figure out. You want her like somewhere here? Because sometimes if I frontline her, she'll just like die right away to the 4 creeps in 1-4.
Usually you just put her like you want to put her like so she draws aggro of 2 creeps if you're worried about her dying. So like I
Oh,
would
okay.
just put her like
It's like
A2 or
here.
something, and then put a melee unit to draw the aggro of the other 2 creeps.
Okay.
On 1-3, I think you can actually technically get crit out of not casting. Like if the creeps just crit every auto, I think there's technically a world where it doesn't cast, but I've never seen it.
Hmm.
I mean, if you wanted to be more accurate, yeah, you could put your Jax up to like A5 here, but
Okay. So here I would buy the Jax pair, swap, or not the Jax pair, the Jace pair, and then put Jax on bench in case there's an orb drop. And then if there's no more gold, then I'd sell the Jax for the Jace too.
yeah, I mean, this seems pretty cut and dried.
I'll just skip forward. So with this, sell a Jax for Jace. Oh wait, never mind. He has the Jace too, so just keep everything.
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward again.
All right, and then here I think what I said is buy the 2 ashes to have the Eldritch outs. Ideally, find a Elise next round for a pretty strong opener.
Yeah, I think I agree. Did I send you? Do you use the meta TFT early game comps tool?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the
Okay.
stage 2, 3, 4 thing.
Yeah, yeah. Do you use the
Mm-hmm.
charm tool as well? Or like the charm win rates tool?
I've like looked through it. I haven't really gone in detail. What one of the questions I had is just like the general EV of the minor wish charm. Like, do you
Oh, it's
always want
always
to
click.
always click?
Um,
You,
the only scenario it's not a click is if you actively lose an econ interval because of it, or if you like assuming you don't get money, or if you lose like
mm,
the ability to hold a unit you want to. But the EV of it economically is higher than 1. So well, I mean, if you take into the cost, it's like 0.3 or something. I did the math when like PVE came out and they kind of dropped the tables, and
mm,
basically it's an always click unless you lose like an econ interval, and the combat ones are a lot stronger than the combat charms that you can normally see. So if you're
mm.
streaking and you get a combat charm, it's very very strong, and it's basically the same story with the major wish. Like the major wish is pretty much an always click on stage 4, and then on stage 5, if you desperately need a combat charm and you've got a lot of gold, then that's like when you can consider not taking the major wish, because if you get econ when you're 1 life, that's not exactly what you want to see.
Right. And then on stage 2, the exception would be so, like you mentioned, if you miss, like if you're at 19 gold or something, you don't want to miss the econ interval, like because it increases variance.
Yeah.
Or if you're just trying to lose streak, right?
Yeah, if you're trying to, that actually happened to one of the people I was kind of backseating, where like I was like telling them, oh, minor wish is like always like econ wise, it's always worth it. You don't lose an econ interval, and then he hit hugify, and then he couldn't sack while holding his units because his
Right.
Syndra had an extra 300 health. So yeah, that is the other exception to the rule, that if you're trying to out open somebody or out sack somebody and you can't full sell your board, it might not be great to take.
Okay.
But yeah, so far seems relatively standard. If Syndra wasn't as strong as it is, I would say that I think you should hold Zoe here because of how much stronger Portal is than basically every other trade in the game on stage 2.
Yep. So here I would sell the Nomzi for the Zoe.
Yeah, it's seems pretty straightforward so far. All of these decisions
Okay.
are
So
kind
I
of
don't
like
think Marcel actually did that. So
that
that's probably a
that
mistake, right?
yeah, that's actually probably like non-negligible amount of EV loss, because you would really want to play Portal Opener here with the Jace 2 if you could. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure in his head he's literally just hard committed Syndra already.
Hmm.
Like stage 1 Syndra drop, best comp in
Yeah.
the game. But yeah, I mean that's definitely a non-negligible EV loss, and on a different patch would probably be a bigger lost, then I would assume it will be this game.
Right.
Okay.
Because if you hit that Galio, that's like just huge tempo for you.
Yeah, it's just the best opener in the game, like Jace 2 portal opener.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So here I would re-roll 1 and 3, Preserve Request and Metabolic first.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Although you don't
Preserver
really
Crest is
want what doesn't kill you because you already have a Jace 2, so ideally you find something better.
yeah. I agree with everything you said. That's pretty much it. On a different patch, maybe you would reroll Preserver Crest last year, but I just
Mm-hmm.
can't see it.
Okay. I mean, Vertical Preserver is good late game, right? It's just a really shit early game.
It's actually, I actually think it's strong early game in like some spots. Like when you have 2-star upgrades specifically, like when you're playing a Frost opener and you have like a Blitz 2 Warwick 2 frontline, and it kind of gives you
Mm,
the Zillion for Frost. Preserver Blitzcrank is like super super hard to kill early game because people just don't have like the damage to kill it.
right.
Um, so I think it's like a very underrated opener and something that you can maybe look towards playing. After the patch kind of changes, because I think right now, like angling towards a fast 8 board is not really that good of an idea. Unless you have like a very good spot for it.
Okay, that makes sense. Would you take that with a Blitz 2 without tank items? Like, let's just say you have carry
Yeah.
items, or would you only take it with tank items? Like,
Well,
you
this
already
is
have a
like
slammable tank
assuming it
item.
gives you like the Frostboard that I'm thinking of, which is like the Warwick Blitz Twitch Zillion, and you have like a
Mhm.
Blitz 2, Twitch 2, or even maybe like a Twitch 1 or a Twitch pair. I think I would always take it. I think that's like I think Frost is very underrated, especially as an opener. And I remember I checked this stat specifically to corroborate this, and it turns out I believe yesterday Frost was the second best performing opener after Portal that it had overtaken Eldritch. So
Huh.
um
So no, the main reason nobody's playing is because you can't really. It's not easy to transition into something else from it.
yeah, it's because the Frost line is not that strong, and it's hard to, yeah, as you said, it's kind of unintuitive to transition out of, because obviously it's easy to transition into comps where you're already playing the units than comps that you're not.
Mhm. It seems like the most natural transition would be into Kog'Maw, right? If you're already holding Blitz and Hunters.
Yeah, that's usually where it goes. I think Olaf is a lot more playable than people think and are willing to play, but obviously it's not like an S tier comp. But generally every comp in the game is playable as long as you high roll it enough. Like every comp in the game, if you're on 10 streak and you can hit like your 2-star 4 cost with enough HP to go 9, you will generally do very well. So it's kind of like that scenario where um I mean, if you hit an Olaf 2 and you have 40 gold left, 100 streak on 4-1, like you're always going to top 2 the game unless you do something really terrible, or Olaf was extremely extremely underpowered, which I think it's only a little bit underpowered. So
Okay.
okay.
So too tanky is like probably good with shapeshifters, right? Or I guess it could be good with vanguards too.
I think it's
And
good
then
with both.
mhm.
I
I
I
wasn't
think
sure whether I'd take eternal growth or too tanky more.
I think
If you're assuming you're going Syndra,
I think I would take Eternal Growth here over 2 tanky, just because you kind of have the Jace 2 already. I mean,
right?
obviously Eternal Growth, like Jace 2 probably won't end up on your final board, but like it'll make your stage 3 pretty strong. That said, like you can argue the same for 2 tanky, but he doesn't, I don't think he has an extra Jace. I think if you have an
Right.
extra Jace here, 2 tanky is very 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 good. Um because the augment is like, if you just look at the raw stats that it gives, it gives you like the best frontline in the game. Yeah, because your Jaces basically get, the 1100 health plus a 40% max health shield,
Mm.
which is which with Shapeshifter is going to be like probably 1700 effective health on your board. Um, so it's like a very very strong augment, assuming you do have the other Jace. Obviously here he doesn't
Right.
have it, so I can't really say I would take it here. I think
Okay.
I would still probably just take what doesn't kill you, but I could also see Eternal Growth with the like Elise pair and the Jace too.
Huh. So if you take what doesn't kill you, are you just you're staying at level 3 and you're not intention? Are you still playing strongest board, or are you trying to make 10 and like actively lose streaking?
So I would actually, this is kind of counterintuitive to how um like you play normally, but in specific metas where you're playing like this very where components are very like everyone will take bow and tear off carousel.
Mm-hmm.
Losing the first 3 rounds is a lot better than in other metas where like it's more flexible or more well balanced. So I do think this is like a spot where if you're playing Syndra, you need your Syndra to stack. So you basically need this bow off first carousel, and I think it's like probably a 1+ placement swing to get this bow off carousel. So in this specific spot, that's why I think what doesn't kill you makes a lot of sense. Just because it kind of aligns with what his goal should be. Whereas if you take like a win streak augment here, although they may be very strong right now, if he doesn't get a bow or a mana generation item off of Krugs, because he definitely won't get one off of Carousel if he's 100 HP.
Mm-hmm.
His spot is a lot harder to play. Like it makes it very difficult to play Syndra if you don't natural bow at some point or a tier, which may or may not happen on Krugs, right?
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And then so he reforged it, or not reforged,
Yeah, yeah, reroll.
rolled it. Portable forge like could be good, but it's probably high variance, right? Like ideally, if
Yeah,
you hit a
I
mana
wouldn't
zane, like
consider it.
it'd be great. But yeah, okay. So then eternal growth seems to be the best pick.
Yeah, I think out of these two, I'd probably take Eternal Growth. But I mean,
If you,
I wouldn't
mhm.
be that surprised if he takes two tanky and is just like praying he hits a Jace. But I think it's also relatively high variance. I think he's kind of chosen to win streak and like take the strongest options. So that's why I would assume he just goes Eternal Growth here.
Mhm. If eternal growth wasn't here, you'd go too tanky before portable forge, just because that decreases
Yeah, they're
variance.
both kind of bad options. I mean, Portable Forge is just kind of like a bad augment, to be honest. So, um, like there's just way too much variance. Once they started adding like all of the artifacts, you don't really have like a good angle, especially if your spot is leaning so heavily towards one comp. Forge gets a lot worse as well because like you might get Vamp Scepter, which is really good for Warwick, or you might get like Silvermere, which is good for Poppy Zoe or like good for multi strikers, but it doesn't really like you don't have an angle to play any of those comps because your spot is so heavily focused on one specific comp that like you can't really take something that gives you so much variance.
Right. Okay. Oh, trying to see the shop and pause. Okay. So here, I think I wrote, I'd buy the Ash 2, sell the Nomsy and Jax's to level, and add Elise, um, Elise and Ash. So you got the 3 Eldritch, uh, Jace 2, and then slam Steadfast on Chase.
What about the charm?
Uh, so yeah, I guess purchase the charm because the EV is positive. I think I wrote down that I wouldn't have bought the minor wish charm because I wasn't sure prior to it. So that's why I was asking you, because I was like looking at it afterwards.
Yeah, I mean a slight thing that you kind of want to think about in terms of like buying charms and slamming items in general is you usually want to click on like the charms first before you make board decisions and sell units. And
Mm,
it's the
I guess
same
it's
thing later
gold,
for like when you're rolling, like you always want to roll before you slam items. It's like the
right?
similar idea where like the charm could change something you're going to do. Obviously in this case it's very unlikely that like minor wish changes his decision. Um but like that's just a general thing, and it's like a good habit you should get into if you're not doing already, where you should pick like you should choose to do the thing that can change your course of action before you do like the fixed actions basically. um
Right.
so like you should click to be like the most accurate line here would be click minor wish first and then make your decision
Mm-hmm.
based off that. Having said that, I don't see any lines where your decision would change, and I agree with the rest of what you said. Um, kind of sell like the units that you're not really gonna play, and you level here for Eldritch and Shapeshifter.
Okay.
Having said that, I think this spot is already actually not looking very good. Like I think this is like a intuitively you would expect this to be a good spot, like very strong board upgrades. Like the board makes sense. You have like a very simple game plan to follow, and your spot is good for it. But
Mhm.
the problem is if he doesn't get a bow or a tier, his spot is completely doomed, in my opinion. And he's not going to get a bow or a tier off this carousel unless he somehow loses 2 rounds. And he also just got like the strongest combat charm you can get on stage 2, so he's not going to lose 2 rounds. Or
Right.
I don't think he will. Obviously he could, but and then so he's basically praying to natural bow on Krugs to fix his spot. So I think he's already kind of misplayed and lost a lot of EV. But this is like how the spot should play if there were like more lines available. Like if
Right.
Syndra wasn't like the only line you're playing, this would be completely correct here. But the only reason this is wrong is because I'm sure in his head Syndra is the only line he's playing.
Yeah. So if you took eternal growth, would you have played the game differently after you took eternal growth, or you're just referring to like you would have taken what doesn't kill you?
Um, I'm I'm referring to like after I take Eternal Growth, I would play the game the same and kind of just be in the same boat as him of like I'm just praying I get the bow because I think it's kind of hard to try and lose streak with Eternal Growth Jace 2 on your board.
Yeah.
Um, I mean obviously you could try, like, but I think I would play the game the same way, and then like just pray you get like a mana item at some point, and that's
Hmm.
kind of like where your game is, or you get like Pandora's 3/2 or like item grabbing or some way to get a mana item. But I think like this line is very inaccurate um for playing Syndra specifically.
Right. Syndra seems like it's only playable if you can slam early, like some mana gen item, or you're lose streaking to get the mana gen item.
Yeah, it's basically because the win con of Syndra is so heavily tied into like the reason the unit is broken is because of the casting stacks, right? Um,
Right.
that basically it's like 50% bonus damage every time your Syndra casts 30 times, which is like just completely obviously it's very very strong, which is why everyone's building essentially triple mana item Syndra. And so
Hmm.
like if you can't get the stacks online, the comp doesn't really perform um to like the broken standard that people have it as.
Okay. So here I would buy the Mordekaiser, and I'd probably scout, and then if if it seems like I would win, most likely I would consider swapping the Mord for the Ash to just let the Syndra cast more, especially with the two dummies.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, yeah, it makes sense to me. You just play for letting your Syndra cast as much as possible. I do think generally in stage 2, like that's a little bit greedy. Obviously, if
Mhm.
you're like 100% sure, then it's fine. But a lot of times, like these sort of things that like people greed the extra things for, you get punished very hard.
Right.
So like the EV of getting punished for this is probably like 10 times more than getting the extra Syndra casted, right? Like a game I played earlier today, I was trying to greet Syndra cast on Krugs and I lost by 2 Krugs, which is like a humongous punish, right? Like I got one more
Right.
Syndra cast, but I lost 2 Krugs. It's like
Uh huh.
so I would say usually it's not worth finding those optimizations. Like obviously if it is like 1,000,000% sure, then yes. But I think a lot of
Although,
people overestimate how likely they actually are to lose a fight.
right, one additional benefit could be that if you do lose the fight, you get better carousel
That is
placement.
true.
Although most likely the bows are all gone anyway, but if even
Yeah,
if you're third or fourth.
that's kind of why you like if you remember last set, when people started like forcing Syndra, uh basically what happened is people started opening for tier. I think I made the
Mhm.
mistake. I said this on replay stream that I think the way you have to play Syndra is you have to literally full open for a tier, because if you don't get a single tier, your game is completely doomed, and they'll all
Yeah.
be gone. And then like the next day, I just wake up and it's like 4 GM players in my lobby, and they're all just full open, like 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. And I think it's kind of like a similar scenario here, where you're so reliant on this one component that everyone is kind of playing for, that if you don't get it, like the EV loss is so bad that you basically have to get it at all costs.
Right. Okay.
But yeah,
So safer plays, keep the Ashen, buy the Mord,
yeah,
hold either Zoe or sell Jax for Cassidon for possible portal on, or I guess you can't really get in portal if you have Eldritch, but I guess portal could be stronger than Eldritch.
yeah.
Uh,
I hold for sure. I don't think I would play Portal now. This would be like a scout thing. If you actually think you lose, I do think Portal's probably weaker, considering its shapeshifter for your Jace too, but I think you mainly hold Portal with the purpose of like next turn you're willing to double pump
mhm.
to play Portal and keep your release on your board, for shapeshifter, and then like stacking your augment obviously. But Portal is stronger, especially with target dummies. Portal would probably tend to be a little bit stronger because it's more DPS and like team buffs, and it generally performs better. Where Eldritch, a lot of the value is in the fact that you get a body on your board.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think I would hold Portal here with the intention of maybe double leveling next turn.
Okay.
The other thing is doing this, like the thing after doing this sort of like exercise is you have to try and kind of do it in your own game, because there's a very big difference between watching someone else play on stream and like actively seeing where their spots are and like what you would do, and then being able to kind of find like the same ideas in your game. Um, because
You're saying
it
do this stage two breakdown for my own games, or you're saying apply the learnings from what I'm seeing here to my games?
it's both. So you should like apply what you think you learned here, but you should also do it for your own games, where like you should try and think about it. It's basically, to sum it up, it's more like just take your own games more meaningfully, because a
Mhm.
lot of times people will autopilot playing their own games on stage 2, which is why like I think this exercise is good, and try and look at it through the lens as you're like an outsider, kind of, watching your thing and seeing like, oh, like what mistakes am I making, like is this really my strongest board? Because it's a lot easier to criticize someone else and like see someone else stream and kind of figure out what they're doing, versus when you're in the moment, a lot of the times you won't catch the same mistakes. Um,
Right.
like I'm sure if like right now, I would say you've pretty much been flawless so far. I'm sure in your average game you're not as flawless. On
Right.
your stage 1 and stage 2, nobody is, because it's a lot harder to do it like game by game. And so even if you can't do it every game, because it is kind of hard to like be focused in for that long, you should do it on your own games. Like just play 1 or 2 games a day where you're like full focus on your strongest board every turn, your best positioning every turn, like everything like as locked in as you can be. Like no stream in the background, no music, no nothing, and kind of like focusing yourself. And that's I think like a very, I wouldn't say easy way to improve, but I think it's the best way to um sort of improve like your own stages. Because again, most people, when you give them this exercise, will do a lot better than they actually play their own stage 2.
Mhm. If the goal partly is to look at your own game with a fresh set of eyes, would it make sense? And I actually recall this for like a writing teacher suggested this for like editing kind of your rough draft, like kind of waiting a day or something, or maybe just not allowing for some time in between the game and the actual review so that you kind of forget some of it. Like, would that make sense?
Yes, that's very very good advice, and I've 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 had to start doing that myself, specifically for like tournament VODs, because specifically when you get eliminated, because obviously when everyone gets eliminated from your tournament, even if you have like the strongest mental, you don't think you tilt at all, or like you think you played whatever level you played at, generally like you still hold some sort of like defensiveness towards your own play. Um,
Mm.
I think that's also somewhat true in writing, although I'm not a writing coach or a writing professor, so I won't be giving my 2 cents on that, but um like you kind of want to let go of like your own personal bias and defensiveness towards your own gameplay, and I think that's a good strategy to do it.
Okay. So here I'd buy the Elise 2. I think I said I'd sell the Jax and Zoe to get to 8 gold. Or I guess before doing that, I'd scout the lobby and considering leveling to add the Mordekaiser so that there's an additional tankiness, and then that would also increase the strength of the Eldritch summon
Okay.
to preserve streak if that was the difference. Otherwise, I would just put the Mordekaiser in for the Ash, and I think there's enough to make 10 by selling the Ash.
Yeah, there is. I think your assessment's pretty accurate. I actually think this Elise 2 changes um because the star levels matter a lot for the Eldritch summon. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say I actually think this Elise 2 probably changes the math behind Portal versus Eldritch. And also you no longer have the target dummies, which is beneficial to Portal. Obviously, I haven't actually run the math behind how big of a difference it is, and no one really can get like the full idea. But intuitively you would expect with your Eldritch upgrades that Eldritch is stronger here. So I think I agree with your assessment a lot. I I do also like that you would play Mordekaiser over Ash here if you think that like it doesn't make a difference. I would say cautiously, I think if you do also have strong people in your rotation, you should keep the Ash and just pre-level. Um because the Ash is your stronger board than Mordekaiser, and although you could make 10, like winning the next round is worth far more than making 10.
Yeah.
Right, because it's 4 streak, which is 2 gold, and then you get 1 gold for winning the round, and then the chance of a 5 streak, as well as you save your HP. So I don't think I would ever actually choose to make 10 here. Um, if there are people who look like they're going to be stronger than you on post carousel. Obviously, if it's like everyone in your lobby it probably isn't going to be you, even if you have Mord over Ash, then there's no real point in making that distinction, and you can just make 10. But usually when you're on a 3 streak, it's better to play your pure strongest board and pre-level. Um, just as like a general heuristic, if you're on a 3 streak, try to pre-level more than selling your kind of potential upgrades. Another benefit of choosing to pre-level here is you can actually hold the Zoe pair, because if you do have a Zoe 2, I think Portal is probably stronger than Eldritch. So you kind of hold your outs to try and keep your streak instead of making the 10.
Okay. That makes sense.
I will
And
say
that.
though, on
Mhm.
ladder, people tend to, like, if you watch a stream, people will always tend to go towards making 10 here, and then in tournament they'll actually tend to be more towards pre-leveling. And
Mm.
there's like people have a bunch of theories to why like this sort of thing is. Obviously it could just be like you're streaming like a little bit more for content for like greeting, and then in tournament you think it's kind of more of like the serious line, or subconsciously maybe you think it's the correct line. But actually he makes 10. I don't think he had to sell anything, right? He kept them word anyways.
Yeah.
Um which ends up being good. But I like better players on ladder tend to think, since they have an edge, like they play more for gold, or like for
Oh.
greedy paths. Um you can't really see it doesn't really work in this example specifically, but in terms of like choosing to 5 loss or to play for 5 loss, better players will do that on ladder in spots where they wouldn't in tournament, because they kind of like the agency that having more gold gives, and so
Mhm.
they just tend to play greedier on ladder. Um versus in tournament, they'll be more cognizant of like the value of saving your HP is more important, because it's kind of like higher stakes, so they played more scared as well. There's like a lot of effects as to why people tend to play safer in tournament and less so on ladder, and which is why like playing for streak tends to be stronger on ladder, um, because obviously if people are playing greedier, it's a lot easier to win rounds.
And so that being more aggressive then would probably decrease variance and allow for more top fours. Maybe not. Well, I guess
Yes.
it could also increase your win rate if you're able to actually streak through all of stage two. But I guess the idea of hitting 10 is that you can hopefully streak and have more gold upside as well.
Yeah.
And partly is maybe streamers are also just looking for YouTube videos.
Yeah. There's. I mean, obviously, like no one. I can't come in here and say, oh, it's because of this for sure, right? It's all kind of speculation based off of like watching people playing myself, but people definitely play greedier both on stream and on ladder than they would in like a more serious environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can try to exploit that. Obviously, like that's not really something to be thinking about that much in TFT as opposed to other games, but uh yeah, it's definitely something worth thinking about. And you can try and maybe apply that to your own like the fresh set of eyes idea as well. Like if you're watching your own gameplay, like is it really correct here to make econ? Specifically one econ interval this applies to a lot more is like making 50. Um because making 50 generally, like if you don't have something that allows you to make more than 50, it doesn't affect your other econ intervals. So you're
Right.
essentially only losing one gold. And I would say a mistake that people tend to make a lot is choosing to make 50 over holding pairs or holding units that actually are like very similar to their board or have a high chance of impacting their board strength.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I struggle with a lot in stage one is how often to make 10 versus holding pairs. And I suppose it's like a very nuanced situation around like what items and what item components you have and how much you can expect to streak.
Yeah,
But generally, the safer play, if you don't have a clear, like strong board direction and likelihood of hitting, is just to hit 10 early.
yeah, I would say it's also meta dependent. Like this meta is a lot more favorable to making 10 than other metas because there's a lot more. Usually when people don't roll on stage 3, it's better to play for streak stage 2, right? Because you're a lot more likely to preserve your streak past that. But in heavy reroll metas, it's less important to play for streak stage 2 because you're a lot more likely to lose it in stage 3 due to people rolling on 3-2 and making boards stronger than yours. Um Having said that, like I used to also have a lot of trouble with like making 10 on stage 1, and I would say like the easiest heuristic for me to follow was kind of around the 3 costs that I get dropped or 2 costs, and I would kind of like value them and basically just put them on like a yes or no list of whether I'm willing to sell them to make 10 or not. So like obviously last set Alawi is like a unit. Alawi and Amumu were like the two obvious ones that you don't sell to make 10 because they're
Right.
just very strong the entire set. I would say right now I would say there's maybe only one 3 cost, which is probably Mordekaiser, that I would kind of put on that list. Maybe like Nico Swain, but the meta right now leans more towards them not being as important because the Vanguard version of Syndra is so much stronger. But in future patches, I could see it being Nico and Swain because the units are very strong early and have good synergy with each other and have strong early synergies in general.
What about Wukong if you have like a stone plate?
Oh yeah, you're right. Wukong is definitely one of the ones where it's worth holding. Although I don't think he's on Mordekaiser's level, like Wukong with a stone plate would definitely be like you it's very bad to sell Wukong if you have a stone plate.
Okay. And then maybe Hecarim if you already have like Jackson Cassidin.
Uh I would say that's more nuanced where it's like depends on your items a lot because you're kind of committing to like an A tier line as opposed to an S tier line. Um
Mm.
Versus Wukong with the stone plate can very easily play into Syndra, whether you're playing Wukong Renewer Syndra, or you're just having your Wukong hold the items for the Mordekaiser. I would say Hecarim's definitely a lot more nuanced than that. Like, if you have a Rageblade Caston, then it's like a slam dunk hold, versus if you have no slam Caston, it's a lot less of a slam dunk hold. Yeah, so all the other units I think are more nuanced, and then there's ones that are clear no's. Like, I think Hui is usually a clear no. Ezreal is nuanced. What other 3 costs are there? Vex is a clear no. Vygar's a clear no. But you kind of have to build like the list yourself, and I think that's like that was the easiest way for me to kind of develop that idea in my head.
Okay. So here, priority wise, I take bow with Elise to finish the Rage Blade because we have open rod. I wasn't sure between if it was available the Mordekaiser with sword, since that's half a Shojin, but the tier's obviously the harder thing to come across. So like I kind of value those two roughly similar, since you'd have the Mordekaiser pair.
I think specifically here, tier is a lot better. Because you have Mordekaiser pair is true, but your augment kind of leads you to not play around Mordekaiser because he has eternal growth. So like you will probably play a Mordekaiser 2 on your board for Eldritch, but I'm assuming he's leaning shapeshifters, considering he clicked this augment. So
Swain.
I think like Swain would be more valuable than Mordekaiser. Rumble would be better than Mordekaiser. I think Hecarim would probably be more valuable than Mordekaiser as well, because Morello is a pseudo attack speed item, and I think it gives you a slam as well as it doesn't give you a sword, which is like the main problem. Because the problem with taking sword here obviously is, as you said, it gives you a sword, which is great if you hit Shojin, not as great if you hit another sword on Crux, right? So
right. Okay, so bow, tier, belt, cloak, and then rods after cloak, Swain.
yeah, I think after that, rod and chain are pretty close. Yeah, I can't. I would say they're probably pretty close. Maybe rod is like slightly better, but I think it's pretty negligible. One thing that would be worth thinking about is whether 3 gold makes a difference for your econ interval after you level here. I think most of the time it doesn't if you're making 10, because you won't really be that close because you're spending 4 gold to level to 5 anyways. But if you're like 14 gold, I think is the interval. I mean, usually I just count it out every game when like before the carousel, but it's something to think about in your own games, like whether the 3 costs will make you the econ threshold after you level. But I don't think it matters in this game, and then glove and sword are both pretty bad here. Sword is probably a bit better because it is the Mord pair, but getting sword, you could also get double sword on Krugs here, which is just completely game over, right? So
right.
There's just a lot of punishes for taking sword off this carousel.
Okay. Yeah, so
okay,
probably
so he's going for a Cloak Swain to start stacking.
Okay.
I think it makes sense with I think I personally would actually take Belt here, but I think he kind of is planning to play around Swain primary tank, and so he's thinking like he gets the permanent health on it. And Cloak is a pretty good component in the comp because you can make Adaptive as your mana backline, which is, I mean, it's obviously not great because usually you build attack speed on Syndra, but like it's sufficient, right? When you're 100 HP, you can't be too greedy about what items you get.
Right. So he bought the charm, buy the lease, and I'd level for Mord.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think I would do the same thing.
Although I guess you could scout to see if you need to level for Mord, but I would have just scout leveled by default.
Yeah, this is just level by default. I mean, even if like the level is extremely cheap, like you lose 1 interest maximum. I mean, you get higher level shops, which are very important. Like there's 200 streakers in your pool. You're on a 3 streak. I mean, like maybe the robot AI, if everyone for some reason is extremely weak, finds like the not level here. But I think you'll be fine if you just auto level here on a 3 streak. Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
don't know anyone
Marcel,
who would choose to not
he
auto level
actually
here.
he
Oh,
actually
the
does not level
Marcel is
here.
the robot.
I think he said he would lose to one of these guys guaranteed, even if he leveled, and so then
Uh,
he would beat the other two or something. I forget what he said on audio. So then he's making 20 and winning.
I mean, fair enough. I don't know if I agree with that personal assessment of the like the board strengths from what we briefly saw, but I mean,
Yeah.
if that's what it really is, then it's fair enough. I mean, the logic kind of makes sense there. He doesn't get punished, so
Okay. So same thing. I would just level here, but
yeah. I mean, I would level
if
here
he's
as
doing
well.
the same logic, he would just scout again, see if that's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, like I think it's just too greedy. This is another classic where it's like if it ever does make the fight diff, the punish is so much bigger than like the risk. Where
Right.
you have to have such a high confidence interval for it to like make sense here. Because like the value of that you're getting out of not leveling here is very very marginal. It's like
Right.
1 gold, but you get lower shop quality. So the EV is probably like zero point 0.4 gold. Obviously you could debate on how you want to value the shops, right? But it's less than 1 gold, and the potential punish here is actually 7 gold, right? Or actually it's less now because 5 streak is worth less, so it's 5 gold. But
Right.
5 gold potentially more if you streak from 3-1, right? It's yeah, I just don't think it's worth
It goes back to like, are you trying to decrease variance for slightly lower EV?
yeah. I mean, I think also his priorities are a little bit misplaced where his position is not completely up, like he's not full positioning for the people that he thinks he could lose to, or
Mm-hmm.
potentially could lose. I mean, I guess he said he loses for sure and wins for sure. Obviously that's not 100% true. Um but I think like if you're gonna try and min max like this, your time is much better spent just positioning for the people that you can lose to, and like full
Right.
like trying to full focus a unit, right? Like Ashe and Syndra should be hitting the same unit here. Um, you should try and put like your Jace specifically in front of his main carry and make sure it's not your Elise because your Jace has your tank items, stuff like that, right? Instead of like trying to min max this like plus 0.5 gold um if you're absolutely correct about everything, which also may not be the case, right?
Right. So here I would buy the Neela, sell the Jace, and play 5 Eldritch level. So buy the Neela level, move the Steadfast to Mordekaiser, and play 5 Eldritch.
Um, I think if you're doing that, you should move Steadfast to Elise. Uh,
Uh, mm.
that being said, I'm
Although
not sure if that's a
you want to
stronger
keep Elise
board.
late game, right? Because then you have to sell the Elise later too.
Yeah, but I mean, the 5 streak is worth much more because okay,
Mm.
like right now, your Elise is going to be strong with the items until you hit a Mord 2, right? Um, which is going to be you're going to be playing a weaker board on 5 streak for who knows how many turns, at least until 3-2 probably, which is
Right.
with 2 turns. While you're on 5 streak, so it's not really worth it. Um, having said that, I don't think I would like his Jace is plus 120 health. It's a Jace 2 with Shapeshifter. I don't actually think 5 Eldritch is stronger here. Um,
Okay.
this is also actually matchup dependent because 5 Eldritch is more damage on your board, but there's like a decent amount of comps here where just having like the 2-star frontline is stronger. Um, and you don't need like the potential backline cheese basically of the 5 Eldritch, which is like if his assessment is correct, where he loses for sure 100% of the time, I think your play makes sense. The most sense to me, where you try and play 5 Eldritch and position, like you could try stack up. You could even try second row Syndra to like kill his front line and hope it starts attacking his backline units, and you get like the Eldritch Lightning Strike, um, and like try and cheese a fight win. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
unlikely it happens, and I think I would just level here for Mord, but it's like maybe worth thinking about. Um, but
Okay.
yeah, I think I would play Mord here, and then play Galio over Ashe.
Okay. And then slam the Morello if you think it'll make a fight diff.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
I probably would have just slammed Morello on 2-5. Well, I wouldn't have slammed on 2-5 because that guy's board was terrible, but assuming any of the
Yeah.
fights look like remotely close, I would just slam the Morello.
Okay.
Okay, so he's kind of, I guess he's sticking by his logic that, um, oh, okay. Well, the logic here doesn't, oh, okay, so he goes with your idea. The thing
Except
is, the
I
logic,
would have sold the Jace, which would have been a huge mistake knowing this board was here.
yeah, you never sell the Jace before you actually see what you're playing, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a good optimization that Marcel P makes here that actually a lot of people probably would not make. They would kind of just auto sell the Jace.
Yeah.
Like I think I probably would auto sell the Jace if I wasn't like focused. And I think a lot of people would make that mistake. So, but having said that, his logic doesn't really line up here with. I can't imagine one of these fights went from like he's losing for sure to suddenly he can win on what I think is maybe a marginally stronger board. If I think it's a weaker board, but um, if you want to argue it's a stronger board, it's probably marginally stronger at best. So um, yeah, I'm not exactly sure his personal logic lines up in this scenario. And I also don't know who he thought he guaranteed loss to be completely honest. So
Right.
I think his
I
two
think
five play was
somebody
just very
made their.
strange.
Hmm. I think somebody made their board weaker. It might have been precedent, like after they lost.
Maybe, but I mean looking at Precedent's board, his board he would have had to make it like a lot weaker for it to be an unwinnable fight in my opinion. But
Right.
hey, I mean taking his word for it, if that was like the true assessment and like the computer agrees there's no way he would win or no way like it never changes the fight, then his play makes perfect sense. Um
Okay.
like I don't agree with this Eldritch play, but I think it's arguable. And I think perhaps maybe if you ask like someone else, they would give you a different answer. Like I don't think this can be. I think the only mistake here would be insta selling the Jace. That would be the only play that I would qualify as like a blunder. But
Mhm.
I think the Jace board is stronger. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So that's the extent of the analysis I did. I think my biggest takeaway was I mean, clearly selling the Jace would be a huge blunder. But the what doesn't kill you, I don't think that would have even crossed my mind that, especially in this meta, to the Syndra point about wanting to get Boa or Tier off Carousel being huge. So, and especially since we had the Jace 2, it wouldn't have crossed my mind. But thinking about it more critically and talking with you about it, I think it makes a lot more sense. I think that's probably the biggest huge shift in direction that I think I would have made. Is there any other kind of big takeaways in terms of my analysis that differs from, I guess, what you would have done or Marcel did?
Um, I think your analysis was pretty spot on. I would kind of advise, like I said earlier, that I think in your own games it's very unlikely that you can find the same lines, which is not a slight against you. I think that's just like a general kind of truth that people tend to be a lot better at analyzing someone else's play than watching themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
like kind of I hope you can sort of reach like the level in your own games that hypothetical you is reaching. Because I think hypothetical you, if you played like the way that you analyzed here, that's probably like a 1500 stage 2. Like it's virtually flawless. There's like a few mishaps there, but I think like I shouldn't say virtually flawless to my understanding. Um, because obviously the game isn't completely solved, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if someone made a TFT solver, it would not be virtually flawless. But as far as like the level of high challenger, it's very very good, and so that's like if you can review your own gameplay unbiased and kind of realize that you're getting to the level where you don't feel like you're making many mistakes, I think you'll have like a very solid stage 2. On the item component thing is it works for not only for Syndra, but like specific metas where there are lots of times where like it's very Rageblade dominant or bow dominant metas where your line or your opener or whatever your spot is very hard committed towards like comps that need a Rageblade or comps that need like a specific item or component. And a lot of those times it kind of makes sense to sort of sack 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, or like if you lose 2-1, you're playing, say you're playing for a streak, right? You lose 2-1, but you recognize that like this bow or whatever component will spike you very hard on post carousel because it'll give you like your critical item. You can kind of think about not even selling your board, but just playing like a weaker board or like sacking if it doesn't cost you econ intervals and kind of try and go 3 loss 2 win and sort of like stabilize from there. So it kind of just has to depend on your own personal like analysis of how important specific components or specific item is in your spot.
Okay, that makes sense.
And like this is a lot more likely in stage 2 than in stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 3 and stage 4, you shouldn't really worry about like this as much. Obviously there's a little bit of it on stage 3, like if you need a tier on carousel extremely badly and like the HP is very close and you're not on a streak, you can consider sacking the round before carousel as like an adjustment. But stage 4, it's virtually not a thing. So I wouldn't worry about that at all.
Okay.
All right, we should probably get into the VOD soon. We will just finish this VOD. Okay, it's been pretty much the hour, but I don't want to kind of like scam you out of the VOD review because we did this. So I don't have anything after this, so we can kind of just go through the VOD until, because I know you have a time commitment after this.
I got
so we can just go
like
through the VOD until you have to go or until we finish the VOD. Because I don't really have much.
Okay. One last question on this. If you slam Morello, would you stick with the Syndra game plan, or would I mean? I guess this is like you're already going down a shapeshifter path, but if you didn't have this augment, you'd probably lean towards Karma, right? Because especially if you're not getting the stacks like an attack speed or mana item for Syndra.
I think it's somewhat nuanced. I think Morello Syndra is actually completely fine as just an item. Like if you're carrying Syndra, it gives you a little bit of attack speed, and the heal cut is somewhat useful. It's like a slightly less good red buff, and I believe red buff is like for second or third best item. Having said that, like ideally you would play Karma. The problem is in most of these lobbies, you won't actually be able to find Karma 2 like ever, just because all of the lobbies are like 3-ish Syndra. I believe the number is actually it's like 2.6 Syndra per lobby in Masters Plus right now. So you should assume there's probably like 4 Karmas out from those people, and then there will be other people trying to play Karma because it's like the premier 4-cost line.
Right.
I would tend to lean towards sticking to Syndra. Actually, if you slam Morello here, obviously it depends on like how the situation plays out, but in my head I would be slamming Morello and sticking to Syndra. And playing Syndra with Morello.
Okay, sounds good.